From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Sitting in tonight, Carol Simpson.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the Gorbachev era. It began on March 11th, 1985, following the death of Konstantin Chernenko. It will apparently end tomorrow, December 25th, 1991, following the death of the Soviet Union. Mr. Gorbachev has scheduled a speech on Soviet television to deliver his farewell. Even today, Mr. Gorbachev had criticism for the new Commonwealth and expressed concern about unrest if living conditions continue to get worse. But those problems will not be his. In Moscow, ABC's John Donvan.
It was one of the last times Mikhail Gorbachev would go to work as Soviet president, the day he bid farewell to his Kremlin staff, the day he completed his resignation speech, to be delivered late tomorrow. At the same time, also at the Kremlin, they were still making speeches in the Soviet parliament, still debating how and when and even whether to declare the Soviet Union dead, as though anyone were still really listening. Most members of parliament had not even bothered to come. So they missed this passionate defense of things Soviet by a man who said he was shocked to hear Parliament discussing the end of the USSR. This is, he said, treason and betrayal. But by tonight there were reports they were giving in to the inevitable, drawing up a resolution to shut down the Soviet government, still insisting that only they have the power to make that decision. The councils of real power were elsewhere today, a conference room in a Moscow hotel where prime ministers of the Commonwealth met to discuss economic cooperation, and the Kremlin office of Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic, whose independence is about to be recognized by the U.S. and has already been recognized by European countries like Switzerland and Italy. The question of what Gorbachev does next may have been answered today by Boris Yeltsin, who said that his government will find money for a research center to be called the Gorbachev Foundation, where Gorbachev and old colleagues like Edward Shevardnadze can study economic and political problems and think up solutions to be used by the Russian government. John Donvan, ABC News, Moscow.
For years now, there have been two Mikhail Gorbachevs. The one everybody in the world saw, the man who won the Nobel Prize, the man who sat as an equal with Ronald Reagan and George Bush. And then there was the other Mikhail Gorbachev, whose power was crumbling at home along with his economy. ABC's Jim Laurie has spent the last several years in Moscow reporting on both of them.
On Moscow's Arbat Street today, Mikhail Gorbachev stood alone, ignored by most everyone. And the few who did stop to have their picture taken with the cardboard cutout had little praise for the outgoing leader.
All that Gorbachev said and did was very good in the beginning. But then things went wrong, so we switched our support to Yeltsin.
In the beginning, Gorbachev did enjoy mass support. From Vladivostok to Leningrad, he went out and met the people as no Soviet leader had before. He heard their complaints and preached to receptive ears his philosophy of perestroika and glasnost, restructuring and openness. While he was praised widely abroad, at home he was unable to satisfy the ever-increasing cries for independence among the republics and for economic change among the people. Food lines grew longer. Demonstrations grew larger. In Red Square, May Day 1990, Gorbachev was booed and hissed, forced to leave the platform above Lenin's tomb. Gorbachev failed to join the rising forces of democracy or to stand up to hardliners. When Soviet troops cracked down in Lithuania, Gorbachev maintained silence on the killings. While Boris Yeltsin, as leader of Russia, did all the things Gorbachev couldn't bring himself to do. Yeltsin embraced the most radical reforms. He walked out of the Communist Party and was elected by popular vote president of Russia, providing a political and moral mandate Gorbachev never had. Yeltsin stayed ahead of the extraordinary changes, while Gorbachev seemed to lag behind. He continued to surround himself with gray and bumbling party bureaucrats, the men who betrayed him. The coup confirmed that while Gorbachev had support outside the country, he had lost all his political base at home. While in his opposition to the coup, Yeltsin seized the initiative and kept it. Upon his return from the Crimea, Gorbachev still resisted the inevitable, at first even defending the Communist Party. The political center had collapsed. Power had shifted from the Kremlin to the republics, yet Gorbachev still pushed for a union no longer possible. The political obituaries in the Moscow media are already consigning Gorbachev to history. One commentator noted, "There is no question now of Gorbachev's departure. His job is done. He came," wrote Izvestia, "and that in the end is more important than his leaving." Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
One program note, Ted Koppel has spent the last 5 days with Mikhail Gorbachev. On Thursday night, he and Sam Donaldson will anchor a special edition of Primetime Live, Gorbachev, The Final Hours, an unprecedented look behind the scenes of the Kremlin as the Gorbachev era comes to an end. Thursday evening at 10, 9 Central Time. In Soviet Georgia, while rebel forces were shelling the parliament building in their unrelenting drive to oust the republic's democratically elected leader, President Gamsa was appealing to the West for help in battling what he called the terrorists. At least 30 people are dead, more than 250 wounded. Sheila Kast is in the capital city of Tbilisi.
The rebels are using every kind of weapon they can lay hands on to attack what has become President Gamsa-Kurdia's bunker. They're using everything from AK-47s to small rifles to pistols poked out of armored personnel carriers. The rebels are well supplied with ammunition. Their shelling is relentless and answered only by sporadic sniper fire from the president's supporters. From the makeshift headquarters the rebels have set up in a tourist hotel across the street to the government building has become a no man's land. It's only on this avenue, the main street of the capital, that a power struggle rages. In the rest of the city and the rest of the republic, life is normal. Residents of Tbilisi gaze on the shelling with detached amazement. Big majorities voted for Gamsa-Kurdia in free elections just last May, and many do not agree with the opposition charge that he has become a dictator. Only a few hundred people have taken up arms on either side.
It is putsch. It is not civil war yet.
But residents worry it might become civil war. Both sides in this conflict wanted independence from the old Soviet state. But now there's no sign of an end to the stalemate between the forces of a president who claims authoritarian rule is the only way to set up a new democracy, and rebels who see his brand of democracy as the enemy of their liberties. Sheila Kast, ABC News, Tbilisi, Georgia.
Two other notes from this country about the changes in Moscow. The United Nations has received a letter from Boris Yeltsin saying that Russia will take over the Soviet Union's seat at the UN effective immediately. And in Washington, a Christmas wreath has appeared on the door of the Soviet embassy today. It's the first time anyone can remember seeing one there.